Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Corridor 8 podcast, collaborating with Gunther Fehlinger podcast. And the topic of our episode today is the world ahead, undoing and redoing. We are honored to have Mr. Fehlinger in our podcast and being together on his own podcast. It's very nice to see you today and welcome to Corridor 8.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Stankov. Georgi, I'm happy to be here.
My pleasure, Gunther.
From Vienna.
You actually was in Munich, and as we know, in the past 3 days, there was a Munich Security Conference, a very important event dedicated to the security and stability and the defense system of the European countries, our broader partners from NATO, and the messages that were sent during this conference still resonate in us, in our minds, of all people who are interested in the defense and security topic, all people who wish to have stronger Europe, stronger NATO, stronger partners outside the borders of our organizations. In your opinion, what was the best thing that happened in Munich? And what was the disappointing thing when we speak about Europe, security, NATO?
For me personally, the best thing was that I could ask a question to Mrs. Strack-Zimmermann from the European Parliament, the head of the Defense Committee, if she supports Ukraine joining NATO. And she said a very clear, that's very rare for politicians, a very clear yes to Ukraine in NATO. And the whole room of 300 people applauded, yeah! So I was very happy about that one. And that was my highlight of the conference. But on the more important matters, actually, Ukraine's NATO membership is the most important matter in the world at the moment. But there is no doubt that the most important message was that NATO is strong, that America is back, that Rubio made a very conciliatory, promising speech, and that we are united and our enemies may shiver because Europe and America together are they are very strong and they cannot be beaten. And we will definitely also win the war Russia is waging against us. We will defeat Iran and we will stand together through these crises which we face at the moment, and we will be victorious. I think that's the most important message of Munich, a new sign of unity between the EU and NATO, and of course that we all want the victory of Ukraine and also the defeat of the Ayatollahs of Iran.
One of your personal causes is to support Iranian people and the change of the regime in Iran. Do you think there is a political will among the leaders who visited and participated in the Munich Security Conference to really support Iranian people, to really change what is going on in this country?
Look, nobody can be sure about the intention of President Trump because, he is a famously unpredictable character. But nevertheless, he has put a whole armada of ships and of military supply airplanes into the Middle East. So this is by itself a huge investment. Maybe he thinks he can get away with it, and just by the threat to achieve regime change, which I don't think, he will have to go to his first big war and he will have to win it in order to remove this religious dictatorship. But I guess, what are the alternatives, please, Mr. Stankov? The alternative is, if you would be the Khamenei of this country, you would definitely try to get nuclear weapons as fast as possible. And I'm sure they are desperately asking the North Koreans, the Chinese, and the Russians, and the Pakistani to give them nuclear weapons. So if we don't attack now, and if President Trump, who built all his political career to not have nuclear weapons in Iran, he will be the one guilty of allowing the mullahs to have nuclear weapons. And I don't think that he wants to go down in history as the one who has facilitated a nuclear Iran in the hands of such crazy clerics. So I think he will attack, and be sure the Israelis want to attack because they live since 47 years under the threat of the dangerous regime. and we Europeans can be very happy if there is regime change. I'm not sure we will all be united. I don't know about the Bulgarian position, but I know about the German position. And the Chancellor, Mr. Merz, he was very clear that it's a much better world without the Ayatollahs running Iran. And so he will have a say in that one. And contrary to the Iraq war, most of the Europeans will support regime change. And it's very, very justified because it's a killer regime who has killed up to 90,000 people in this year alone of their own citizens, and they have not deserved to stay in power.
And if I remember correctly, once you called China enemy of the free Europe. So if we look about Iran, we also think about the coalition, the axis of Russia, China, and Iran. So the situation in Iran is directly connected with other stakeholders who have interests in this area and who support the regime in Tehran. So in your opinion, when you see the signals from the Trump administration, is it possible to have a united European NATO effort to break the coalition of Russian, China, and Iran? Is it really possible to be engaged and involved in such thing? Do you have the resources? Probably this is the main thing that we have to ask.
Mr. Stankov, let's be optimistic here on this podcast. You know, it's always possible to say it's too much and we are poor and everything is like this. But let's not forget, half of the global GDP is produced by the NATO allies. Yeah? And let's not forget the EU has 20 trillion budget. Okay, we always have to think wisely what we do with money, but at the end of the day, this is a lot of fiscal and firepower, and we are the richest part of the world, including Bulgaria, obviously, and we are like 450 million people in the European Union, basically 1 billion people. We have a trillion budget for the defense, and we have also about 55 trillion of GDP. So it's quite a lot, and we can do what we think is necessary. What is the priority? We can definitely do that. Of course, you know, the other side has China as a facilitator, and that's why we have to be clear who is the enemy. And the enemy is China, is Russia, is Iran, and North Korea. These are the 4 hostile states, the main hostile states. You can add Cuba and others, but the main hostile states are these 4. And here we have to see that we have to reduce and downgrade our relationship with China, because in the last few years they were a decisive supporter of Russia and Iran, and they have to pay a price now for that. Of course, I'm not advocating for war with China, but I'm advocating for war with Iran, because Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. We can still change the regime there. And obviously, we must make sure that Russia is defeated in Ukraine and is leaving Crimea and the Donbass defeated. This is very important. And this is also what's going to happen. You have no doubt we will win the war in Ukraine as well. And we have enough resources together. It's in a way a gigantic pincer movement. The American Israelis defeat our enemy Iran, and we give the Ukrainians enough money and also enough material supply in terms of weapons, like actually the Bulgarians are doing already. Very, very thankful. I have to be very thankful. All Europe must be very thankful to Bulgaria defense industry for the enormous effort. And so we will win this war, and Russia has the limitations of resources, because nobody will borrow a dying regime any money, and we have ultimately the best capacity to limitless fiscal supply on the world capital markets. And similar, like in the First and Second World War, once America enters the war, we are on the road to victory.
But besides of the coalition of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, there are problems inside the West. For example, Mr. Orban and his government are stopping the progress of the United European efforts to help Ukraine to develop the Western Balkans, still exist under the influence of Mr. Orban, especially North Macedonia, how we can change the situation inside our own family. This is just one of the examples, but also we know that sometimes Mr. Fico is very skeptic about Ukraine, about the support that we need to give to our friends in Kiev. I'm glad that you noted the Bulgarian support for Ukraine. It's really very invisible support. Bulgaria is not a loud supporter. We don't speak vocally in a very high tone, but we do what we can do as a society, as a state, especially with the production of Soviet caliber munitions, a lot of armors since the first days of the war. But still, what we do with the voices inside the European Union, inside our collective family, which are voices of denial, of breaking the consensus, stopping and blocking the consensus, how we can manage with such figures. Sometimes you call for isolating politicians like Orban, but they're in power. What to do in order to prevent such possibility for such people to stop the united action of the European countries and the united actions of NATO countries?
Look, Orban will be defeated by his own people. So this is very important. In April, he will lose this election. And Peter Magyar, he is already leading in the polls, and he is the real good alternative. He is a center-right-wing man, a conservative, libertarian man with a good agenda. He is not a socialist or kind of liberal extremist. Yeah? He is very much a man like Orban was 20 years ago, because before the Russians have corrupted him completely. Because the Russians are buying the soul of the people, and with billions of money, they buy the whole system in Hungary, and also partly in Slovakia, and also in Austria and in Bulgaria in the past. You know that very well. They do that in every European country where they supply their energy. They buy the politicians with that. And you have to get energy free from Russia, Putin free, because then they have less money to bribe the politicians. And the Bulgarians, by the way, I'm very, very proud about the Bulgarians, because you were the most pro-Russian country in the mentality for history, and because of the liberation in the 19th century. And you've broken with Russia because you are morally good people, and you have turned your economic system, your energy system, your capital system, your military system, all in the supply of Ukraine. You are probably one of the hero nations of this whole war, of this whole effort now the last 4 years. And if you can do it, it can be done as well in Hungary. And Hungary, of course, has been the victim of the suppression and the terror of 56, where the Soviets have killed so many Hungarians. And, you know, that must be the spirit we find out again. And Orban's treason, which is very connected with his nuclear power station and this $30 billion deal which Putin gave him for his nuclear power station, and also with the gas contracts, it must be exposed, and it will be exposed. And I'm very, very optimistic Peter Magyar will win, and pro-European Hungary will be very surprising for everybody, because Hungary was actually, before Orban came into power in 2000, it was in 2010, I think, and it was a very pro-European country. And it will be again, because the Hungarians are Europeans and they want to be in Europe, and they are totally upset with the corruption. If you see alone the volume of Orban, he was a very slim man when he came to power. Now he can hardly walk anymore for his billions and his belly. And it's absolutely a disgrace. And it will change the Balkan as well, because all his support for Macedonian conservatives and all the things he did in Albania and in Bosnia and in Serbia, nobody will get any money under the table from Budapest or indirectly from Russia via Budapest anymore. And Magyar will clean up the whole mess, and we will all be very much united again. And it doesn't matter that Rubio went there now to somehow support Orban. This will have no impact on the voters, because the Hungarians know very much how much Orban has been stealing in the last years. He is kind of a Putin-esque figure, in many aspects, and he will pay the price now at the ballot box. And then he will face justice. The court system will work properly again, and then we will see Orban, the criminal, being in jail. And that's the way forward for 2026.
And from your perspective, what is Russia's core goal, strategic goal, right now and beyond Ukraine? And how the goals of Russia threatens European order, and what actually we could do realistically in this moment. I mean, it's not a coincidence that we have these places occupied from Georgia, from Moldavia. So since the early 90s, Russia was preparing to go back to these regions where it had influence before. So it's very naive to think that Putin or Russia, the Russian regime, will stop with Ukraine. They want more. So in your opinion, what Russia wants and what we can do in order to prevent their interference in our world and the change. So if we go back to the topic of this conversation, what they want to undo in our world and what we have to do in order to redo the world that we want to.
Look, Mr. Stankov, we have to understand Russia better, and we have to understand Putin because he's our enemy. It's important to understand our enemy. Here is how to understand him. Putin and his clique, they never accepted the end of the Soviet Union. The end of the Soviet Union as well was not a military victory of America or Europe. It was a fiscal and economic collapse of the Soviet Union under the triple costs of the Afghanistan invasion, of the oil shock, which the Saudi Arabia gave them with very cheap oil, and of course the inner inconsistency. And they had no money, and then they basically were bankrupt. And Putin and his generation and the people around him who kept him to power, and they have understood that very well. And that's why from the year 89, 98, when Putin basically in various, you can call it a coup, a kind of strategy of the KGB to develop the ruble, to start the war in Chechnya, he came to power via that kind of intrigues. Yeah? And from the first moment, his whole effort was to resurrect the Soviet Union, Russian Empire, and the power stretch which we had. He wanted to consolidate. He needed to consolidate first internal power in the period until 2003, when he cut off this Khodorkovsky and Yukos, and then he consolidated globally the power, and he started his wars in 2008, because he needed the Caucasus, and obviously he needed as well Ukraine and Serbia, and Belarus. These are the four countries which in the mind of the Russian imperialists, they will never accept the independence of Ukraine, Belarus, Serbia, and Georgia. And this is exactly what you see today. And in the last 20 years, either with military form or financial form, via the Serbian petrol company, or via this Ivanishvili in Georgia, or Lukashenko in Belarus, or by various measures of intervention in Ukraine, he has actually achieved a lot in his terms. Yeah? And because maybe, I don't know if the listeners are so well aware of the Ukrainian history, but already in 1999, when Poland joined NATO, the Ukrainians wanted to join NATO as well, and they had a pro-European, pro-NATO opposition leader, Mr. Chernobyl, and he, surprise, surprise, died by a car accident during the campaign when he was leading. And I'm sure that Putin was behind that, or his KGB team, yeah? And they are specialists for car accidents. And Chernobyl was killed in 25th of March, 1999. And then later, the kind of kleptocrats, they call it the red directors, in the kind of technocrats from the Soviet Union, who became the president of Ukraine. And the Ukrainians have fought back and back again in 2004 and 2014 and today, the last 4 years, because they really are Europeans. They want to be similar, successful, like Bulgarians, like Polish. They want to be in the euro. Congratulations, Bulgaria. They want to be in the European Union and the NATO. Putin never allowed that. So we have to understand it. And the historic advantage now is, it's a bit tragic, of course, because the Ukrainians are losing so many people and it's so costly. This war is costing us probably already 3 trillions of euros in Europe. And it costs 1 million of people. It's all a tragedy. But the indirect positive effects of this war is that Russia is in suffering what history calls a so-called imperial overstretch, because Putin wages basically a war to defend his alliance system in Armenia, in Ukraine militarily, in Iran, and he is in Africa. And, this is all very costly in terms of keeping the allies up and waging war in Africa, in Ukraine, and defending now with airplanes. They're bringing material which they need so urgently to win in Ukraine. They bring it to Iran. And so he is basically tuk everywhere. And he is losing his focus, and he is losing very much the resources, because even when Russia is obviously a country with almost unlimited natural resources, its cash is much scarcer. And exactly out of his psychological experience of the past, he has saved a lot of money in order not to have a repeat of his bankruptcy of the Soviet Union. And that's his kind of fear. And that's why he had such a big pension fund or wealth fund, 600 billion, and he has stolen about 300 billion himself, and all his oligarchs even more. And so he has basically always been careful not to have a moment of no money anymore, because nobody will borrow Russia money. He's not able to go to the capital markets. He's not able to go to the world consumers and ask for his bonds to be sold, because he is already blacklisted, and obviously nobody will give him any money. So ultimately, the story will end with a total fiscal collapse and then a societal collapse of Russia. This is almost inevitable now, this is for sure. And it's just a question how long he can postpone it, because now when he has to wage war basically indirectly against the Americans in Iran, and he has to somehow keep his position in Ukraine, and we are giving more and more weapons, thanks Bulgaria, to the Ukrainians. He is under so heavy pressure, and the more he sees to be cracking, the less the Chinese will support him, because the Chinese are very technocratic in a way, careful. They don't want to be on the losing side, because basically they sell their products to us. And so Putin will crack and Russia will crack, and you will see something like a Yugoslavian crisis in Russia. And that's very good, because we never want a big Russia, aggressive and toxic and as a danger on our eastern side anymore. So we will have a Yugoslavian scenario with civil war and crisis in Russia. And that is also very difficult, of course, with a nuclear Russia. But I'm advocating for an assisted kind of breakup of Russia along the many, many republics and nations which they have inside. And that's the scenario I see for the coming years. It will also be very difficult, but it's much better than having a Putin Russia next to us, which is brutally and heinously aggressing us so terrible in Ukraine. And we will also win that war, which will be very similar to the Yugoslavian succession crisis in Russia, and prepare for that.
So interesting. And you advocate for a big NATO enlargement with Ukraine, Kosovo, Bosnia, Austria, of course.
Yes.
And you predicted this, I remember this, and you now mentioned it again, that one day Russia will be like Yugoslavia in terms of crushing and creating 6-7 independent nations.
Yes.
It's the same future that you predict for Russia, but can we predict some kind of timeline, or at least conditions that we have to see that should happen in order to achieve a really secure Europe with a less aggressive Russia, not being like Putin's Russia, but let's say more democratic, probably disbanded Russia, giving the right of self-determination of its republic or autonomous regions. What kind of conditions should be on the table in order to see this process happening now?
Look, we have all the experience how to disassemble Yugoslavia. We have supervised this project very successfully, and now nobody would question the existence of Slovenia, Croatia, Macedonia, Kosovo, and all these other beautiful countries which now will come to the European Union and to NATO. And this is very clear. We have, of course, a revanchist and pro-Russian Serbia. And this is a problem. We have to isolate Serbia because it's treating the minorities of the Bulgarians, of the Albanians, of the Bosnians very, very badly. And it's still today a very corrupt oligarchy, which in my view must be isolated. So the logical way forward is Kosovo, Bosnia in NATO, because the rest is already in NATO. And of course, then all the countries, including Albania and Macedonia, to join the European Union, the Euro. And then we have a basically completely isolated Serbia, which will allow the Serbian opposition to end the Vučić regime. This is the very good scenario, and I'm very optimistic that this will all happen very soon, because Europe is waking up, and we are no longer accepting this kind of oligarchic pro-Russian regimes of Belarus and Serbia, Georgia. You will see we will be very strict with Mr. Vučić. He is no longer welcomed in the European circle. And now, after his recent escapades with the rule of law and his non-show in several events, you think his time is come. And the people of Serbia already, basically since 5 years, they're in 5 different waves of protests. They are very upset with him. If you want, I can also address the question of ex-Russia, because I have written and made many videos and participated in many conferences. You can see all my work on ex-Russia, and this will be much better for us. And of course, it will be a difficult process, or like it was in Yugoslavia, but we have all the institution. We have a lot of experts, like, for example, me, with experience in working in Kosovo, in Macedonia, and in Albania. And, you know, despite it looks very big, of course, there are many, many historic nations in this bunker of nations. And let's be a bit optimistic. Nobody has predicted the fall of communism in Bulgaria, for example, in the year 88. They were all sitting, like always, very happy in the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Bulgaria. And 1 year later, they were all retired or in prison or trying to find a better way somewhere else, because communism fell within 1 year. And it was always the case that regimes look very strong, but suddenly they are no longer so strong, and then they fall very fast. And I'm quite optimistic that Putin will fall even this year already, maybe next. He still has some money left, but he has no friends left but China and Iran. And we will take now Iran out of the equation. And so this will be the end of Putin. It will be coming very fast. And then everybody will watch this podcast and say, Mr. Stankov, it was good to listen to your podcast, because you heard it first here. And this is exactly how it's going to be.
But people will also say it was Gunther Fehlinger who told this thing. So,
you know, it's not only me, it's also the Ukrainians who have also, because the big thing is, of course, which changing everything is not the heroic fight of the Ukrainians alone, but the Ukrainians know, of course, the Soviet Union much better than we Austrians, or even better than the Bulgarians, because they were very much the elite of the Soviet Union. And when you know a country, a regime so well, like the Ukrainians, who have all family in Russia today, who have been educated in the Soviet system, they know how to fight the Russians. They know how the Russians are thinking, and they know what it takes to take down the successor state of the Soviet Union, that is Russia today. And sadly enough, there will be again a smaller version of Russia somewhere around Moscow, which will be a very, very bad state, like Serbia is today. And this will be repentant and difficult, and we have to deal with it. But it will be with much less resources, with much less nuclear powers, and it will be a much smaller problem for the West to tackle. And we will tackle that problem as well in the future. But many people will be free, as the Bulgarians are now, and even some of them will join the European Union. Why not? It is absolutely possible to think like that.
when we speak about the Russian world, Ruski Mir, actually, this is the concept that Russians use to justify their aggression and wars in Georgia, in Ukraine, in parts of Moldova. They have a presence in so-called Transnistria. And you mentioned Serbia and of Mr. Vucic. So is it correctly to say that a Russian world has such a small Balkan, let's say, brother? This is the Serbian world, Srpski svet. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is a very similar concept that is developed by the politicians in Serbia. So can we speak like about Serbian world like a mirror of the Russian world, bigger Russian world, which promotes greater Russia, respectively greater Serbia, or at least cohesion, national cohesion, influence in the surrounding countries. In the last report of the European Commission about the progress of North Macedonia, it was included such conclusion by the observers that North Macedonia is in the sphere of interest of the Serbian world, Srpski svet. So it's very often related with Yugo nostalgia. It's also related with some anti-Bulgarian sentiments, which are provoked by the media. And we have to mention here that a huge part of the media in North Macedonia is actually with Hungarian investments. So there are a lot of connections since the time of previous Prime Minister Gruevski, who took refuge in Hungary. So how can Macedonia survive from the hug and kiss of Serbian world? And what is the opportunities here? What are the chances for North Macedonia? What should people in Macedonia know? Because many of them actually do not have any other clear idea what is going on, since the influence of the media, of the propaganda is very strong. By the way, one of our viewers, I just noticed now, he asked the same thing, how Mr. Fehlinger see the concept of the Serbian world in the context of the EU integration of the Western Balkans. And do you think that such ideas increase instability in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Montenegro, in Kosovo, and of course in Macedonia?
Mr. Stankov, yes, many questions. The question, first of all, North Macedonia has come a very big way already with accepting the peace deal with Greece, and it's now a NATO ally. And this is very important. So nobody can touch North Macedonia because North Macedonia is our ally, and America and all European allies have promised to defend North Macedonia with its entry towards NATO in 2020 in March. And this is very decisive. So Bulgaria and Macedonia are allies. You are basically in the same defense alliance together with, of course, Albania, Montenegro, and with many, many other countries, all in all 32 countries. So this country is very, very strong, and it's very, very secure and safe. So there is no question of the existence of North Macedonia or something like this, because ultimately American nuclear weapons and French nuclear weapons are there to defend North Macedonia and to defend Bulgaria. Very good. So what we have is, of course, that the Russians and the Serb nationalists, because in Serbia they are also pro-Europeans, but the Serb nationalists, which, by the way, hate me very much. I'm described as the najvećniji Srbomarac Šveto in Serbian nationalist media, which is not true, because I have personally shaken the hands of Đinđić 3 times, and I'm really very, very active since 35 years for democracy in Serbia, because for us as Austrians, as you know in history, we have a really difficult relation with Serbia, but we want peace with Serbia. But Serbia is the problem. Serbian nationalists are the problem. Putin, who has killed basically, it's more or less clear, he's behind the plot to kill Đinđić in 2003. He has turned Serbia around because it's the tool of Russian power in the Balkans. This is Serbia. That's why in 2008 he has bought this big energy company, NIS, this Nafto Energia Serbia. Yeah? This is the tool which with they control the energy system. And sadly, also in Romania and Bulgaria, they controlled the big energy supply, but this is now finished. Luckily, that was very good. Mr. Trump and also the sanctions of the EU, many things have contributed to cleaning up that mess, and it will be completely cleaned up. But Serbia is, of course, a problem. And what they try is now to buy influence in Montenegro, in Bosnia, in Macedonia, and also in Kosovo, to make Kosovo very complicated, to make Bosnia very complicated, and of course, to undermine the progress which we made the last 10 years, especially with Montenegro in NATO and with Macedonia in NATO. So they try to now to politically roll back. And they have made some successes in Montenegro and in North Macedonia. And sadly, that's why North Macedonia and also Montenegro have not joined the new defense alliance of Croatia, Albania, and Kosovo for the defense of Kosovo, which both countries should have. And also Bulgaria should have done that, by the way. And also Bulgaria could engage much more against Serbia and help North Macedonia much more into the European Union. But unfortunately, Bulgaria is somehow also stuck in the past of a nationalistic kind of narrative, which leads then Bulgaria to somehow stop and block Macedonia, and drives then some parts of the Macedonian society into the hands of the Serb nationalists, which is very negative. So what would be the much better policy for Bulgaria is to embrace North Macedonia like a bigger brother, which you are basically for history, and accept that Macedonia is an independent nation, an independent state, and a NATO ally, and make sure that it joins into the European Union in the next European Parliament elections. And then all these pro-Serbian elements in Macedonia will see that Serbia is isolated, which I propose since many, many years now in the public, and that Macedonia is very successful in the European Union. But of course, for that, and then Macedonia needs to change as well. We can discuss this in a moment. But the better politics, because I think a lot of listeners here are from Bulgaria, the better politics than to bash Macedonia is to embrace Macedonia. And you have actually, the Bulgarians in history, much better the history than me, but the Bulgarians have been fighting many wars for Macedonia. And now this European situation has given you the opportunity to be united with North Macedonia in NATO, EU, and the Euro. And this is historic. And what you do, you spoil it a bit. And that's not a good policy. You should embrace it, and you should make sure that the Macedonians love you and take you into the European Union. And the Serb nationalists will pay the price, and they will be isolated for many decades to come until they change, hopefully soon. But until they change and join the European idea, they will be isolated.
I think that we really fully embrace Macedonia, and we love Macedonians. Actually, we have a lot of viewers on our podcast from North Macedonia. They understand when we speak, and even now have some questions. So everything is about the negotiation framework, and everything is in the hands of the majority of the parliament of North Macedonia. So it really depends on them right now. But it's a lot of history. We put history aside. What we have to do is to look at the future, and here the first steps really belong to the politicians in North Macedonia, who have to have this historical responsibility to start a certain process. And one of our viewers from North Macedonia is asking, what's the future? What is your opinion about the future of Macedonia in European Union? What's your take? Why so long Macedonia stay out from 2005 as a candidate? So it's really about the negotiation framework that should start as soon as possible. It really depends on the majority, as far as I know. Mr. Mickoski has to do something in this direction, but what do you think? What is necessary in order to...
I started to come to the Balkans in 2005 as to work and live in Kosovo. And I remember in December 2005, I was celebrating the EU candidate status of North Macedonia at that time. And was really a very happy day. And I was so happy. And I thought Macedonia will join together with Croatia in 2013. But history turned out differently. We had this terrible summit and this kind of Greek disaster in Bucharest in 2008. And then Macedonia took 12 years longer for NATO membership, and still today is far behind Montenegro and Albania in terms of EU membership. But hope is still there, because we can have a settlement. And I hope that Michalowski, the prime minister, will make this agreement and the constitutional changes. I think that he will do it, because now in April, his big paymaster and supporter Orban will lose the elections, and there will be nobody else to support him, because the Serbs are getting now the full hammer of Brussels and Kaja Kallas, and he will have nobody to run. If he really wants to go the full Orban, he will be very isolated as well, and then it will be the end of the ambitions for Macedonia to join during his prime ministership. But if he's smart, and actually I was told he is very smart, then he will join the West, and he will be much, much more compliant with the Western demands. He will do this kind of constitutional change in May after the fall of Orban. He will be very happy to put it through the parliament. And of course, all sides should then facilitate it, not to have any kind of extremist new demands from the Bulgarians, because my information from the Macedonian political leadership, and I know many of them personally, is very clear. The moment that they want to do that, this constitutional change, which, by the way, is also very difficult for the North Macedonians to accept, but they might do it, and I think they will do it. But the condition they have is that this is then connected directly with 2029 EU membership and with voting in the European Parliament, because they have to deliver something as well to their voters. Because the reasons why many North Macedonians are so angry is because they have been duped and tricked by Macron when they did the peace and the name change in 2018. Then Macron has stopped their EU ambition, and he basically destroyed the Zaev government with this crazy decision by this Macron, who is completely confused personality, and I really don't like him. And he made a lot of bad things in the Balkans, and that's what the French normally do. No, nevertheless, beside that little track, the situation is we have this opportunity now, but then all sides need to be disciplined, and need to be also disciplined in the public languages, and also make sure that the leadership of North Macedonia builds the consensus to achieve these 80 votes in the parliament, which are needed. And then I don't want to see any nationalistic outcry in Bulgaria, please. And we have to really work hard to keep the Secret Service integration of Serbia in Bulgaria low, and the Americans have to be on board, like in 2018. And if we all work together, we can achieve this really tremendous thing. And then there should be also clarity that North Macedonia joins together with Montenegro and Albania and North Macedonia into the European Union in 2029 and votes in the European Parliament already. And then the dream of Goce Delchev, that the Greeks and the Bulgarians and the Macedonians will be united in one NATO, one defense alliance, one European Union, one currency, will be completed. And I hope that the Macedonians will put as well a EU flag and a Bulgarian flag at the sarcophagus of Goce Delchev in Skopje, and I will personally come to witness that ceremony. It is my long dream already to have the Macedonian and the EU, the NATO, and the Bulgarian flag at that monastery in the center of the old town of Skopje, and then we are all united, and Russia and Serbia will have lost.
So good fairy tale about the future. Hopefully, future success story. Hopefully that will happen.
You're optimistic here, Mr. Stankov. I'm not a depressive pessimist.
It's better. But in order to do this, in order to look at the future, we have to do something with the past. And I agree with you about this. Both our countries have to do their work. And you called for North Macedonia to cancel its communist Yugoslavia invented holiday of 11th October. Generally, why people don't understand, and what should people understand about the communist legacy, and why communism and communist narratives don't have place in European Union, in United Europe. So why do you ask about this? You have a series of such posts which really impressed me very much. I am witnessing Bulgaria how long it took us to liberate ourselves from the communist past, from the narratives, from the mindset, and you call for the same thing in North Macedonia. So why do you say this?
No, because it's important to overcome the shadows of the past. Yeah, Bulgaria, I already applauded, has overcome the shadows of its Russian past now under the light of the Ukrainian war and the Russian war against Ukraine. And you have started a lot of things which were not easy for you, to remove Russian monuments and to remove Russia from your narrative of history and see Russia as it is, as a genocidal maniac power. And that was very, very good. Applaud for that. But when it comes to Macedonia, Macedonia is, of course, a much more fragile historic political entity than Bulgaria. And they have a number of historic narratives which are basically fake and invented partly by Stalin, by Tito, and they need to be removed as well. And, you know, it's not a coincidence that Macedonia has a number of national days, yeah, which I think, my recommendation, by the way, for Macedonia would be to have only one national day of independence, and that's the real Independence Day of 91, it's the 8th of September. But unfortunately, Macedonia has several of them, and they have this, I call it the Tito Partisan Day of the 11th of October. They have the Wimmere Day of the 23rd of October. And they have the 2nd of August of the Linden uprising of 1902. And they have also the day for the Ohrid peace agreement of 2001. And, they have so many days because their history is a little bit fragile, their identity fragile, and every political group has their own national day, basically, which is a bit too much to my thinking. And so I exactly called already for the 11th of October to be dismissed and to be, everybody can remember specific days. In Austria, we also remember the liberation of the KZ Mauthausen and the Holocaust memorials, and but it's not necessary we have only one national day. It's the 26th of October, and the same must be true as well for North Macedonia and as well for Bulgaria. I'm also critical for Bulgaria to have the 3rd of March, this kind of San Stefano Bulgarian Day. It's absolutely unacceptable today because the real day of independence of Bulgaria is, to my best knowledge, the 5th of October 1908. Yeah, and you can celebrate also the end of communism, for example, as your new national day, because there modern Bulgaria was born out of the ashes of communism. But to use the 3rd of March, which was a very different Bulgaria, which was not free, but Russian vassal, and it was much bigger, is of course sending shivers to all the nations around you, and is not fair and historically incorrect. Yeah. So in order to really have reconciliation, Bulgaria could easily adopt the 5th of October, for example, a very good date of 1908. Yeah. And of course, that's historically much more correct. And the Macedonians can somehow downgrade all these Ilinden days and all these Wimmere days and all these partisan days and have just one day, which is international as well, the recognized Independence Day of Macedonia, the 8th of September. And that would also a little bit de-escalate the tensions between the two brotherly nations of Bulgaria and Macedonia and make the situation a little bit more better, like we have it with Germany and Austria, for example, where we also have some competition and we have some jealousies, but in principle, we are very friendly with the Germans whenever they are 10 times bigger, and they are, of course, more powerful by that, but we have very friendly relations, and the future of Macedonian Bulgarian relations should be like Germany or Switzerland and Austria with, for example, Switzerland would be a good role model in terms of their relations with Germany, and they are very friendly, and this we should achieve as well in the case of Macedonia and Bulgaria.
Thank you for your answer. And yeah, we are working on this, and there is an ongoing discussion in Bulgaria about which day should be the national holiday of Bulgaria. There are a lot of voices about 20th, 4th of May. This is the day of Cyrillic alphabet that we honor in Bulgaria. Our alphabet is the third different alphabet beyond the Latin and the Greek alphabet in the European Union. So it's also a very strong symbol of our identity, cultural heritage. So there is an ongoing discussion in Bulgarian society about this. I agree with you. It's something that we really should think about. And one last question, I wouldn't like to misuse with your time, but it's about Austria. And our friend Ivan Kolev asks, do you see a shared interest between Bulgaria and Austria in the Western Balkans, whether economic or political? How can the two countries contribute to change in all these countries? What we can do together, our states, our societies? In your opinion, what is the perspective about this?
No, first of all, let me apologize for our total miscommunication and failure of Austria to block you so long into the Schengen entry. That was a tragic mistake, and I apologize in the name of the Austrian nations for this mistake. Yeah, I'm very sorry. And I fought every single day since that was announced in 2021. I fought for Bulgaria to join the Schengen zone, and I'm very happy that you now can move easily to Romania, Bulgaria, and it's much better for your economy, for your people, for your citizens. It's much better for our European economy, and this is a big achievement. The second achievement is also Bulgaria's joining in the Eurozone. You are now, for all extent and purposes, the full member of Europe, also in the Eurozone, and this is really very important, and it will make Bulgaria very successfully successful together with the flat tax of 10%, which you must defend and keep 10% corporation tax, 10% income tax. You are amazing. And this will make Bulgaria very, very successfully, because we will now, because of the war and many factors, transfer much more money into infrastructure into the Eastern Europe. And Bulgaria will have modern trains, modern highways, modern energy infrastructure. And that's a good opportunity as well for Austrian companies to engage much more with EU-funded projects in Bulgaria in the field of energy, railways, and of course highways. And you can do something, be a little bit more open to Austrian companies and be a little bit less corrupt. That would also help a little bit, and a little bit more transparent in your tender processes and the way the government works. That would help your reputation in the international investors community really a lot. And you have seen that this is really transformative when you allowed it, because you have already achieved a lot in the last 20 years. But you could have achieved much more if your rule of law system, your kind of courts, and your governor and prosecutor general would be working according to European lines, which we have seen now very successfully in Poland, in Estonia, in Czech Republic. It's possible to be better than Bulgaria in that term. And this is also the demand. And the Austrian businesses and the German businesses and the American business will respond very positively to these changes. And as you have seen already, the Austrian, for example, in terms of FRN, which is part of your energy system, but also in other solar power project, wind parks, and so there is already a major, significant investment in Bulgaria. I'm sorry that Raiffeisen Bank has left. That was a mistake, yeah. But I'm confident that more and more the Austrian, German, and American investors community will re-engage with Bulgaria now into the euro, because that's the biggest single measure you could do in order to reduce corruption in the financial system, because now you are part of the ECB supervision system. That will be wonderful. And if you now manage to a little bit have more stability in your government, yeah, that it would help as well, because you need also to have some speaking partners constantly. And this unfortunate role of Mr. Borisov, where he's always in the shadows but never in power and still around or whatever, this is not extremely helpful. So we need some clarity in the politics, some cleaner process, which is giving constant contact partners to the international investors communities. And Bulgaria will be amazing, because you are already one of the most beautiful countries in Europe in terms of tourism and your cities. And additionally, if now the euro and Schengen and the flat tax and NATO, of course, and all these factors and this enormous boom of the defense industry, thanks a lot, you should be proud about it. And this kicking out of all this Russian murky business interests, I think your future will be one of the best in the European continent, because you will be at the crossroads of Europe. You will see, and the future will be extremely successful for Bulgaria.
Thank you very much for your time. It was a real pleasure and honor for us to have you on the podcast. Hopefully not the last time. You're always welcome here. There are a lot of things to discuss, and it's very important for us to have objective voices who can tell us how perspectives look from outside. We have a lot of things to do together in order to support the European unity, NATO enlargement, and you might be sure that in this we support you very much. So it was really honor for us from Corridor 8 to have you on this stream. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All the best. Thanks for the invitation.
Long live Europe, long live NATO. Да живее България, да живее Македония, слава на Украина!